Imagine pulling up to the one place on Earth that kept you sane during a 9-month deployment, only to find a family of strangers eating dinner in your kitchen. That was my reality 3 weeks ago. I had spent nearly a year in a high-stress environment, dodging things no human should have to dodge, all while holding onto the mental image of my $450,000 custom-built lake house. It was my sanctuary, my reward, and my entire life savings. But when I got home, I didn't find my keys waiting for me at my parents' house. I found a sold sign hammered into my front lawn and a legal nightmare that would end with my own father collapsing in a courtroom. I had to make a choice that would effectively delete my family from my life forever. Was I wrong for choosing my property over my parents? Or would you have done the exact same thing if the people who raised you turned out to be the people who robbed you? I really need to know if I'm the villain here, because my sister hasn't stopped calling me a monster since the verdict came down. To understand how this happened, you have to understand the house. This wasn't just some real estate investment. I'm 32, and I've been in the military since I was 18. I lived like a monk for a decade, taking every hazardous duty pay, every deployment bonus, and every overtime opportunity available. While my buddies were buying sports cars and blowing their checks at bars, I was scouting land. 5 years ago, I found it. 3 acres on a crystal-clear lake with private dock access and sunsets that look like they were painted by God himself. I designed the house myself. I wanted floor-to-ceiling windows, reclaimed oak floors, and a kitchen that could handle a feast. It was my forever home, the place where I planned to decompress after I finally finished my service. When I got my most recent deployment orders, the house was finally finished and fully furnished. I didn't want to rent it out to strangers who might wreck the floors, so I turned to the 2 people I trusted most: my parents, Mark and Linda. My dad, Mark, is a guy who always took pride in being the rock of the family. He's a retired contractor, or so he said, and my mom was always the doting grandmother type. We were close, or I thought we were. Before I shipped out, I sat them down in that very lake house. I gave them a set of keys, the code to the security system, and a limited power of attorney. Now, for those who don't know, a POA is a powerful tool. I granted it specifically so they could handle the boring stuff, paying the property taxes from my dedicated house account, hearing a lawn service, and dealing with any emergency repairs like a burst pipe. I looked my dad in the eye and said, "Dad, this place is everything to me. Just keep an eye on it." He hugged me, told me he was proud of me, and promised that the house would be exactly as I left it when I returned. My mother even cried, saying she'd make sure the dust didn't even settle on my furniture. I left for my deployment with a sense of peace, knowing my sanctuary was in the safest hands possible. The first 6 months were standard. I'd call home when I had a secure line, and my parents would tell me how beautiful the lake looked. My mom would joke about how she went over there just to sit on the porch and think of me. But around month 7, things started to feel off. My dad became harder to reach. When we did talk, he seemed distracted, constantly bringing up how expensive everything had become. He talked about his investments, hitting a rough patch, and how the economy is failing everyone. I felt bad for him, but I didn't think much of it. I even offered to send him some extra cash if they were struggling, but he snapped at me, saying he didn't need charity from his son. I figured it was just his pride talking. Little did I know, at that very moment, he was already talking to a real estate agent about my property. I found out later through the discovery process in court that they had listed the house just 2 weeks after that phone call. They didn't even use a local agent who might recognize the name or wonder why the son wasn't involved. They found a high-volume firm 2 towns over. My dad used the power of attorney to sign the listing agreement. He told the agent that I was distraught and wanted to wash my hands of the property because of PTSD, a complete and utter lie that makes my blood boil to this day. He used my service as a weapon to facilitate a quick sale. Because I had given him the POA for property management and financial transactions related to the estate, he found a legal loophole big enough to drive a truck through. He claimed the sale was a necessary financial transaction to protect my interests. They sold the house for $450,000, a steal for that market, just to get the cash quickly. The most calculated part was the timing. They closed the sale exactly 1 month before I was scheduled to return. They didn't tell me. They didn't tell my sister. They just moved the money. When I touched down on U.S. soil, I was exhausted, grimy, and ready for a long soak in my custom tub. I didn't even call them to say I was back early. I wanted to surprise them after I'd had a night of sleep in my own bed. I hitched a ride from the base, dropped $100 on a long-distance Uber, and watched the familiar trees fly by. My heart was racing with excitement as we turned onto the gravel driveway. But when the Uber pulled up, there was a brand new Jeep in the driveway. The porch furniture, my expensive teak set, was gone, replaced by colorful plastic Adirondack chairs. My key didn't work. I pounded on the door, thinking maybe my parents had let a friend stay there. A man in his 50s opened the door, looking confused. When I told him I lived there, he looked at me with pity and said, "Son, we bought this place last month. Here's the paperwork." I didn't believe it. I thought it was a prank. I thought I was having some kind of hallucination. I called my dad right there on the porch. He didn't answer. I called my mom. She picked up, and when she heard my voice, she let out a strangled sob and hung up. That was the moment I knew. I felt a coldness spread through my limbs that was worse than any fear I'd felt overseas. I went straight to the county recorder's office the next morning. I saw the signatures. My dad's handwriting, signing my name by power of attorney. He hadn't just sold the house. He had emptied the house account, too. Every cent of the $450,000 was gone, moved through a series of accounts until it hit a private offshore investment fund my father had gotten sucked into, a blatant Ponzi scheme that had promised him triple returns. He had gambled my entire life on a sure thing to try and fix his own failing finances. So that is where I stood. My home was gone, my money was gone, and the people who gave me life were the ones who pulled the trigger. I was effectively homeless and broke. Despite having worked myself to the bone for years, I had to make a choice. I could let it go, try to rebuild for the sake of family harmony, and let my parents live out their lives in peace while I started from zero. Or I could go nuclear. I could file the lawsuits, report the fraud, and potentially put my own father in a prison cell. Before I tell you about the absolute bloodbath in that courtroom and the revenge that followed, I want you to pause. Go to the comments right now and tell me, what would you have done? Would you protect your parents even if they stole your future, or would you make them pay every single cent back, no matter what it cost them? I chose to go nuclear. I hired the most aggressive litigator I could find, a guy who specializes in fiduciary fraud. We didn't just sue for the value of the house. We sued for the return of the property itself, alleging that the sale was fraudulent because the power of attorney was used in bad faith. This meant the innocent buyers were now caught in the middle. I felt bad for them, but I couldn't let my life's work vanish. When the process servers hit my parents' house, my mom called me screaming, calling me ungrateful. My dad tried to play the victim, saying he did it for the family and that he planned to give it all back once the investment matured. He actually had the audacity to ask me to drop the suit so he wouldn't lose his dignity. I told him he lost his dignity the second he put my house on the market. The day of the hearing was the most intense experience of my life. My dad showed up in his best suit, looking frail and old, clearly trying to play on the judge's sympathies. My lawyer, however, was a shark. He presented evidence that my father had been warned by a financial advisor that the offshore fund was a scam asterisk before he sold my house. He proved that my father had intentionally waited until I was in a blackout zone during my deployment to finalize the sale, so I couldn't stop it. The judge, a stern woman who clearly had a soft spot for veterans, looked over the documents with a growing expression of disgust. She looked at my father and asked, "Mr. Miller, did you at any point attempt to contact your son to ask for permission to liquidate his primary asset?" My father stammered. He tried to say he thought it was for the best. The judge didn't buy it. She began to read her judgment, and it was brutal. She nullified the sale of the house, meaning the title reverted to me, and the buyers had to be reimbursed by my parents' estate. Then, she issued a massive financial judgment against my parents for the legal fees, the emotional distress, and the missing funds from the house account. She looked my father dead in the eye and said, "You have not only violated the law, you have violated the most sacred trust a parent can hold. You used your son's service to this country as a cover for your own greed." As she hammered the gavel down, my father's face went from pale to a terrifying shade of purple. He gripped the edge of the table, let out a ragged gasp, and collapsed right there in the middle of the courtroom. The room descended into chaos. Bailiffs were calling for a medic, my mother was shrieking my name, accusing me of killing him, and the judge was clearing the court. I just sat there. I didn't move. I watched them wheel him out on a stretcher. He'd had a massive stress-induced cardiac event. Do I feel guilty? People ask me that all the time. My sister won't speak to me. She says I should have just let him have the money and worked it out. She thinks a house isn't worth a father's life. But I look at it differently. He didn't have that heart attack because of me. He had it because he finally had to face the reality of who he was. He was a man who stole from his son, and the weight of that truth was what broke him, not my lawsuit. The aftermath was a total wipeout. To pay back the buyers and the court-ordered judgments, my parents had to sell their own home, the house I grew up in. They are now living in a small, 2-bedroom apartment, surviving on Social Security. My dad is stable now, but he's a broken man. He won't look at me and I won't look at him. I got my lake house back. The strangers moved out and I moved back in. But the house feels different now. Sometimes, when the sun is setting over the water, I sit on that porch and I wonder if the silence was worth $450,000. Every time I walk past the kitchen, I remember that he sold this very floor I'm walking on. I have my sanctuary back, but I'm the only one left in it. My family is gone, scattered by a greed that I still don't fully understand. I suppose the moral of the story is that trust is a fragile thing, and once it's sold, you can never really buy it back, no matter how much money you have. I won the legal battle, but the family I thought I was protecting during my deployment never really existed. I've spent the last few weeks changing the locks and putting the house in a bulletproof trust where no one, not even me, can easily sign it away. I'm moving forward, but I'm doing it alone. If you think I did the right thing by standing up for myself and holding my parents accountable for their betrayal, please like this video. It helps more than you know to feel like I'm not the only one who sees it this way. Subscribe for more stories about people who had to learn the hard way that blood isn't always thicker than water. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.